Alright, so now we come to episode 6 of Dexter New Blood, the first episode of the second half. We're finally on the back half of this series, not season, series, because it's over after this. And I have to say, after the ending of 5, which in my review for 5, I said that's probably my favorite episode along with the premiere. There was a lot of things I really liked in 5. Especially the very ending, the final shot of the last episode. And then with the promo for this episode, you know, I really thought it was going to be the beginning of the end. I thought it was going to be the beginning of the last arc where it just builds up and it sort of earth-shattering, whole shitstorm throughout all for the rest of the series. I didn't quite get that. I wasn't disappointed. It's still a very solid episode. I kind of liken it to episode 4, where, you know, none of these episodes have been filler. I said 4 kind of felt like filler, but also felt more like just a transitional episode. This kind of felt like that only by comparison to what I was expecting. You know, Angela now knows his name is Dexter Morgan. I thought that was just going to open the floodgates to all kinds of reveals and really just kind of bring his world down on his head. It didn't quite go that route. It's kind of resolved more or less in like the first couple scenes. But that said, it did propel the story in a much bigger way at the end of the episode. So it's just kind of everything in the middle. And the the main plot of this episode is, okay, now Dexter knows that Angela knows that he's Dexter Morgan. And so he spends almost the whole episode trying to figure out who figured him out. You know, was it my son who's pissed off at me? Was it someone in the police department, possibly Officer Logan? Was it Molly the podcaster? And that's the one he really settles on. So he kind of, not really stalks and vets, but he really tries to figure out what she knows. That's pretty much the main thing of this episode. Also, Kurt and Harrison become much closer, which I do like that parallel as well. I noticed with each episode there's some sort of parallel between Dexter and Kurt, which Kurt I'll get to, because there's something I really noticed in this episode. And in this one, it seemed to be that Kurt is everything that Harrison needs. You know, a role model, a listening ear, a coach, someone to be there for him. Dexter is still pretty much Dexter. He can't communicate with them. Everything he does is more or less wrong. I mean, even in the beginning of the episode, where, you know, because in the last one, Kurt tells Harrison, if someone's pissing you off, do something nice for them. So this opens up with Harrison doing all of, like, the morning routine around the cabin for Dexter as something nice. Dexter notices the job application for the diner, kind of tells him not to do that because he doesn't like Kurt, and kind of ruins that momentum. Which I will say, one, I really like the kid that plays Harrison. I think he's doing a fantastic job. But the roles of Harrison and Deb are really kind of wearing out their welcome almost. And with Harrison, there's little things in each episode that helps move his story further and the whole story further. And yes, I know his mother was killed in front of him. I know his father abandoned him. I know his stepmother died, placed in foster care, and then he pretty much hitchhiked all the way to New York. I get why he's angsty, and sort of pissed off, but they really seem to that seems to be his one note. Like I know Dexter's not really meeting halfway with him either, but it kind of gets old after a while. And with Deb, I would really like to see an episode where Dexter just gets fed up with that part of his mind and says, I don't need you anymore. And then maybe later on realizes he needs her and she comes back. And it's not to say Jennifer Carpenter is bad. She's still really good, but there's no real consistency. Each episode is like a different Deb. And I will say this one was the most subdued and kind of the most tolerable it's been in a while, like since the first couple episodes. But I mean, from one episode to the next, it's either like the premiere, she was very loving, almost kind of like a mother figure. And from then on, it's like whether she's doing that like strained face yelling like, you're a serial killer, or she's kind of witty and sarcastic, or she's kind of joking and playful, or she's like in this episode she was kind of neutral. And this one didn't really have her kind of doing anything fantastic, like the wood chipper, or on the stage when there's like a dozen of her with We Heart Dexter signs. This one was a bit more subdued, but I would like some consistency with Deb, or maybe just have her less. I mean, Harry had consistency. He was, he had a constant demeanor, a constant personality and goal, kind of a, his conscience was like a constant. Deb seems kind of all over the place. Those are really my only big complaints. Harrison is just, because like every conversation with him and Dexter, it's like the, yeah, well, fuck you, Dad type thing. And I feel like that's getting kind of old. Like maybe he can finally break down and say, Dad, I'm begging you at this point. But he did have some really good moments in this. I mean, it was the beginning when he was doing the chores for Dexter, and he's trying to be nice before Dex screws it up like he always does. The scene in the therapist room was really good. And then during the wrestling match, where we really see his dark passenger come out. That's another thing they're gradually doing that I really like. So that's with Harrison. And with Kurt, I wanted to say he is the most layered and interesting villain we've seen on this show since Trinity. I mean, every episode they peel back another layer to him, and just when you think you have him figured out, they throw something else in there. And Clancy Brown is, a lot like John Lithgow, magnificent at being the charming, lovable guy in public and this very sort of scary, dark, really twisted guy in private. I mean, here we see he's got the girl, his last victim, that didn't go so well when he had his meltdown because she didn't do what he wanted, so he shot her in the face. Here he makes like a cast for that part of her face, and it doesn't look quite right, so he just pounds the hell out of her head, and he's like almost crying and seething because he's upset. Fantastic. And I'm very eager to see his motive, his story, what has made him tick, what made him who he is. And I haven't felt that on this show since Trinity. He is the most interesting one since then. I think Trinity will always be my favorite Dexter villain, and possibly the biggest villain in Dexter's life. But this one's kind of close, because if I can make a prediction, I think it's going to lead towards something similar to season 1 with the ice truck killer, but like with Harrison, Dexter, and Kurt, because when Harrison's Dark Passenger comes out in this episode, Kurt like hugs him and says, "I'm proud of you." And so it's like, do you want to be with the surrogate father and thrive and exploit, or, be yourself? Or do you want to be with your biological father and try to suppress it and be as normal as possible? I could be wrong, but if it does go that route, I think it could be very interesting. So, another thing I really liked was when she has him come down to the station and say, "Okay, Jim, who is Dexter?" And he explains what he did. One, I like how he said, he wanted to die. That's why he drove into the hurricane. Because it kind of didn't make sense. At the end, that was one of the things that didn't make sense was, it seemed like he was committing suicide by driving into the hurricane, but then we see him alive, like, oh, maybe he was just faking his death, which made it seem kind of like sloppy writing, which a lot of season 8 was. But here they put a lot of closure onto that by saying, I wanted to die, but somehow I survived, and I took that as a sign. And they didn't show it. It was all just Michael C. Hall's performance and his explanation, which was another highlight of the episode. When Michael C. Hall has moments like that, I love it. I like how they didn't do any kind of flashback or retconning or showing what we didn't see with the hurricane. I'm a firm believer that less is more, especially with what we see. And, I'd rather him just explain it and let our minds put the pieces together. So I loved that scene. I also loved the tension in the therapist room where Dexter says, he's talking about all the past things in his life that kind of made his life fall apart. And when he's talking about, Rita, Harrison's mother, that marriage fell apart. And Harrison just kind of looks at him and he's like, "Fell apart? Is that what you're calling it?" And then he just tells the therapist, like, "My mother was murdered by a serial killer." And then, you can feel the tension, and Harrison says, "I feel abandoned. Not overall, but here on this couch." It was like, at that moment, I realized you're not in on this with me at all. You're still bullshitting me and everyone. And yeah, some of the slower parts was really the scenes with Molly, the podcaster. I mean, you did have some classic Dexter stuff, like she meets up with Kurt for a interview because she wants an interview about Matt Caldwell, which I will say, I feel like this finally puts to rest the Matt Caldwell case. And I've been hoping for that for a while, but it really, the last thread to that case was Angela wondering why Kurt would lie as to, saying Matt's alive, that he talked to him, that he's in New York. Like, this was a case that could have ended a couple episodes ago, but that little plot thread was still there, and I think this is finally the last episode dealing with Matt because of how it ends, which I'll save for when I get into spoilers. But, even though I've already talked about a lot of the episode. But, like, so Dexter thinks she is there because there's some new scoop on Bay Harbor Butcher. He even scrolls through her podcast. And, of course, it hints at Trinity, then BTK, which Trinity was modeled after. I have to say that because or people in the comments will say that to make sure I know that they know that. And then Bay Harbor Butcher, which we do get a nice little clip flashback of Dokes doing like from season 1 finale. And he does hear that some special forces guys that were friends with Dokes have since come out and said, hey, he was doing some special ops at that time. There's no way he could have killed people in Miami. So he thinks, oh, there's some further investigation. That's why she's here. And I have always wondered that, and wondered if they would explain, like, go into that, like the state of the Bay Harbor Butcher case, Dexter Morgan's reputation in Miami, if there's any new developments. I've always been curious on, like, what is going on with Miami. So you do get some classic Dexter. Like, he finds out that their interview is going to be at the bar, so he acts like he's going to get some breakfast, and he goes up to the bar to plug his phone in. The bartender allows him to use the charger, but he turns the recorder on, and then he follows them. I'll save the rest for spoilers, but I thought this was still a solid episode. It did suffer from something similar in the last one, where there's a really great reveal, but the way they kind of do it in the dialogue kind of throws it off. So even though it was a good episode, and it does move the plot forward in a big way, I was expecting, a huge shitstorm to come down. So that's why it felt more like episode 4. Like, not really filler, but I guess more transitional, and not like where a lot of things happen. But it is changing the status quo, and the ball really is moving now. So I guess now I'll get into some quick spoilers. So Dexter is following Molly and Kurt out to Kurt's hidden cabin, which it is funny that this woman who specializes in studying or podcasting serial killers walks right into, well, my son's actually, I keep him out at my private cabin where, so just till everything kind of boils over. But if you want a special interview, I can take you out there. No one will know you're out there. And she walks into it. And there is a point where Dexter's standing there from a distance, and he watches them go down in. And he thinks, would it really be my fault if Kurt kills her? But then it shows them in the hallway, and you can tell she's getting apprehensive, because he's like, Matt, open up, we got an interview. Probably got his headphones on. You can go ahead right in if you want. Then Dexter burst in, and this is another classic Dexter where he's really putting on a face of whoever he needs to. Like, hey, I was following you guys. I thought I saw someone out and about, just making sure they weren't messing with your cabin. Say, wow, what a wonderful place you got here. Oh, is Matt in there? Oh, I'd love to say hello. And he just kind of burst in. He's like, what a lovely room. They're like, in his inner monologue, he's like, camera, door doesn't open from the inside. This is definitely some serial killer stuff. Then he offers Molly a ride back. And that's when he knows that, okay, she's here for Matt Caldwell. She's not here for Bay Harbor Butcher or Dexter Morgan or anything. So, Harrison's Dark Passenger. And I like how this played out, too. It wasn't over the top. It was done very well. So, he's having his first wrestling match. And, of course, Kurt is there. Dexter shows up kind of late because he was following Kurt and Molly. Then he had to drop her off. But Kurt is like the assistant coach, so he's allowed to be down by the mat. Dexter's not. But so Dexter, Harrison goes up for his first match, and this douchey jock is like, I'm gonna tear your fucking head off. Harrison gets the upper hand, and the guy elbows him. So then, I don't really know wrestling that well, but, you know, they stop it, and Harrison's able to like mount the guy, do whatever he has to do, try to pin him. He has the guy pinned. The coach is tapping, and the kid even taps out, and Harrison's got him like an arm bar, and it shows him just getting all pissed off and kind of having this inner struggle. And then you just see him just fucking bend the kid's arm, completely like bend it like rubber. The whole room explodes. The two different teams go at each other. And that's when Kurt goes up and hugs him and is like, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. You did so well. Dexter runs down, pushes Kurt off of him, saying, stay away from my son. Which now Harrison's really pissed off at Dexter. So that's why I wonder if it's going to go in that route where he'll have the surrogate father where he can be himself, or the biological father who's never going to be there, but we'll try to make him normal. And then the very ending, and for me, possibly the best closure, because it does finally end this Matt Caldwell thing. It's been going on for 6 episodes. I'm sure people could have figured it out, but as far as us as viewers, it didn't really come out and say why Kurt lied about Matt being alive. I always assumed it was because, you know, right around the time he said, oh no, Matt's still alive, don't worry. It was like right after that, he killed the first victim that we see in this series. And I thought he just wanted everyone like out of the woods and, you know, kind of bring their guard down. But it was because the next stop of the search were the caves. And Angela puts that together. She was like, it was right when we said it was the caves. And I don't know if Kurt owns the caves or if it's like out near his property or closer to his property. But her and this one deputy decide to go out and check it anyway. It's the night of the wrestling match, so all she has is that deputy. They go out there. They find this sort of man-made like blockade, or like this closed-in area. Move all these rocks, go in, it's like this secret opening, and they find a body. Now, where it gets kind of cheesy is she picks up this rotting arm, sees a bracelet, and she says, it's Iris. Now, I do agree with some things I've heard already that why couldn't it have just been a body? That would have been enough for her to think, okay, Kurt's up to something. This is all Kurt, that's why. I guess it had to be that for dramatic purposes. And how is it this Trinity-like prolific killer that's been doing this for possibly decades? You know, the first body they come to, which is actually fairly easily accessible, happens to be that one. But my first thought was, okay, a lot of times with serial killers, their first victim can be the catalyst that kind of helps make them a serial killer, or it's a very special person, or, you know, they're really attached to their first kill. Maybe Iris was his, and that's why she has her own kind of special place. Maybe the rest were disposed differently, or something that separates her from the rest, essentially. And then that's where we get another scene, kind of like in the last episode, where it's a great reveal, but the dialogue kind of sours it. Like, when Angel was, what was that kid's name? Harrison. You can try to make it overly dramatic. Angela calls Dexter, and instead of, hey you, it's, this is Jim, And she says, I don't need Jim, I need Dexter Morgan. Which, yeah, I get they're saying, no, I don't need my boyfriend, I need the forensics expert. But and the show has been very well written, even in the dialogue. But when it comes to big reveals like that, sometimes they get a little hokey. That was one of them. I think that could have been handled differently. And then that's where it ends. The promo makes it look like, okay, he's going to get to stretch his Dexter legs a little bit. She's going to bring him to this body, and he's going to be able to do some forensics. Or at least with what he has, which is just his eyes at this point. He's got no tools or anything. And Kurt, I think, is getting arrested. Or at least he's going to be some sort of material suspect. Or they're starting to put the pieces together that Kurt is up to something. And, you know, just like with the ending of episode 5, I'm very excited for next week. Which, that is another thing I can say about this show. With each ending and with each promo for next week, I am more excited than the last week, which is what a show like this should do. Even if the episode is kind of slower and more dry a bit, it doesn't dissuade me from seeing the next episode. But it really does look like the beginning of the end is upon us, and that the ball really got rolling since, you know, since the ending of episode 5, when she found Dexter Morgan's obituary. And yeah, this one was a little slower with that. It wasn't quite the shitstorm, bringing the whole world down on his head type episode I was expecting. But it was still a very good episode. Kind of like episode 4. I liked it more than 4. It did have more things I liked. It did have more, especially acting moments. Again, I loved the therapist scene with Harrison and Dexter. We got to see some classic Dexter moves, like planting his phone on record and showing up at Kurt's cabin. And yeah, I'm very excited for episode 7. We've only got 4 more episodes left. I can't believe we're nearing the end that soon already. But anyway, so stay tuned for episode 7 next week, and thank you for watching.